as being very wrong, and I remember them very specifically. One of the instances was the fact that we were listening to journalists who were staying in the Palestine Hotel. And I remember that specifically because during the build-up to shock and awe, which people in my unit were really disturbingly excited about, we were given a list of potential targets in Baghdad, and the Palestine Hotel was listed as a potential target. And I remember this specifically because putting one and one together that there were journalists staying at the Palestine Hotel and this hotel was listed as a potential target, I went to my officer in charge and I told him that there are journalists staying at this hotel who think they're safe, and yet we have this hotel listed as a potential target. And somehow the dots are not being connected here, and shouldn't we make an effort to make sure that the right people know the situation? And unfortunately, my officer in charge, similarly to any time I raised concerns about things that we were collecting or intelligence that we were reporting, basically told me that it was not my job to analyze, it was my job to collect and pass on information, and that someone somewhere higher up the chain knew what they were doing.
Who was the officer in charge? Who did you tell?
My officer in charge for the duration of my mobilization was Warrant Officer John Barry.
Now, when you saw this list that you say, a list of targets, and Hotel Palestine was on it, why would you see this? Where were you? How did you pick up this piece of paper?
It was actually an email, and I worked in a secure building, and we were given updates about what was going on. I actually am not sure why we were emailed this list of potential targets, and I'm not even sure in what context it was emailed to us. I would assume it was just an effort to let people know what was going on in the area, considering our mission. But the only reason that I really remember that specific email is because I knew, having listened to journalists staying at the Palestine Hotel, talking with their families and loved ones and talking about whether or not they were safe and trying to reassure their family and coworkers and loved ones that they were safe. When I saw that hotel listed, I thought there was something that was going terribly wrong.
We're talking to Adrienne Kinne, military intelligence, formerly a sergeant. We're going to go to break, and we'll come back to this conversation. Stay with us. Here on Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. Our guest is our former Army Sergeant, worked in military intelligence, served for 10 years in the military from '94 to 2004. Her name is Adrienne Kinne, joining us from Vermont. That list that you saw, that you got in an email, what else? What were the other targets in the list? Do you remember?
I can't remember. The only reason why I remember that hotel specifically is because I knew that there were people staying there who thought they were safe. And that's really the only reason why I remember that specific target.
And when you say they thought they were safe, can you remember what the conversations you overheard that you were eavesdropping on?
Basically, a lot of them were just kind of, workers, they're journalists who were calling their friends, family, loved ones, to include phone calls to the United States. And we could hear both sides of the conversation. And basically, it would just be, people calling their loved ones in basically the middle of the night and talking to them, and just, I mean, people were so concerned knowing that we were building up to shock and awe and that Baghdad was going to get really severely hammered by our military, that everybody worried about their safety, and the journalists staying at the hotel were no different.
Now, you're an Arab interpreter, translator. Why were you listening to conversations in other languages?
Basically, when we were given this mission, it was unlike anything I'd ever done before. I had actually worked in the same building previously on active duty, and at that point in time, everything was very structured. People were given specific missions, specific targets in their language, and there was a lot of guidance as to how you were to proceed through collection of intelligence. And things were very closely monitored. I remember in probably 1997 that I was listening to a military intelligence cut from a Middle Eastern country, and at that point in time, during the situation report, the person relayed the fact that an American was visiting the Middle East on a diplomatic mission. And because an American's name was referenced in this particular transmission, we felt that it was a violation of our directive, which forbade the collection on American citizens. And as a result, we deleted every evidence that that intercept had ever taken place. After 9/11, when we were mobilized and given this new mission, it was very starting something from the bottom up. And it was really striking that in intercepting all these satellite phone communications, the majority of the traffic was not Arabic. It was languages beyond our translation capabilities. We would get Chinese, Japanese, Tagalog, Tajik, a lot of Dari, Persian, Pashto, some minimal Arabic, but really not that much. And so we would just go through this process of going through and identifying who belonged to what. And as we began to identify different phone numbers which belong to these humanitarian aid organizations and journalists, we actually had the capability to block those phone numbers from being intercepted. But due to guidance given to our officer in charge, we did not do that.
You were listening to NGOs speaking to each other?
Yes.
That isn't legal. You're not supposed to be eavesdropping on them.
Right, and actually, over the course of our mobilization, I actually listened to a conversation between an American and a British aid worker. And during the course of the conversation, the British aid worker told the American,
"We've just lost that satellite. We will try to get Adrienne on the telephone to continue this conversation right now." Adrienne Kinne, former Army Sergeant who worked in military intelligence, served for 10 years from 1994 to 2004. I want to turn back now to the documentary Hotel Palestine, Killing the Witness, that was produced by Jose Couso's network, Telecinco. In addition to interviewing numerous journalists who were inside the Palestine Hotel, we also hear from two of the soldiers wanted in Spain, Staff Sergeant Sean Gibson and Lieutenant Colonel Philippe de Camp.
Gibson swings his cannon toward the hotel and requests Captain Walford's permission to fire, but he still hesitates.
And I still hesitated. You hear me? I hesitated.
I know.
Okay? And I took my time and I called it up to ensure what I seen. And it was clarified with another set of eyes.
The decision was not taken in the heat of battle. 10 minutes go by until Gibson receives the order to open fire.
Une violente déflagration ébranle l'hôtel.
We did not know that they had reporters in the Palestine Hotel. If we would have known that, we would not have fired around over there. I don't even know if that information was given to the U.S. Army. I do not know that, okay? If it was, it didn't get down to my level.
What Colonel Perkins and Colonel DeCamp have told me is that they did not have any information about the Palestine Hotel or the location of Western journalists prior to coming into Baghdad on April 7th.
When Colin Powell visits Spain on May 2nd, he confirms what everyone had assumed. The military command was perfectly aware that the journalists were based at the Palestine Hotel.
We knew about the hotel. We knew that it was a hotel where journalists were located and others, and it is for that reason it was not attacked during any phase of the aerial campaign.
The generals monitoring the fighting from their headquarters in Qatar soon watched the incident broadcast worldwide on television and called Baghdad demanding an explanation.
That image had gone out on satellite television, and their senior commanders at the 2- and 3-star general level messaged them and said, "What are you doing shooting the Palestine Hotel?"
Tomlinson overhears radio communications discussing the incident. Lieutenant Colonel DeCamp is informed of the attack by his superiors and shouts over the radio.
Who just shot the Palestinian Hotel?
Tomlinson hears how DeCamp, clearly upset, asks Walford,